Czar of Noir, and the founder of the Noir Festival.
I'm confident of one thing, that I am in an auditorium filled with people who prefer old Hollywood to new Hollywood.
Yeah.
No, just movies.
Exactly, just the movies. Okay, I'm wondering, however, if there's anybody in the auditorium this evening who is actually coming to Noir City for the very first time. That this is the okay, we've got one right here, we've got another one right. Okay, you picked the wrong show. Because if you came because you're wondering, what is all this talk about film noir? What is that all about? And you decided to see these two movies, you're not going to leave here with any better understanding of what film noir is all about. Because these films are not really representative examples of film noir. But seeing as these days it has become so difficult to see vintage movies in 35mm prints in a movie theater on a big screen, sometimes I take the liberty of including a couple of films in the program that may not conform directly to our notions of noir, but I hope that through picking films carefully that have the roots of noir in them, or somehow figure in the chain of events that led up to noir, you might actually get a better understanding of why some early films aren't considered noir, and then they might have, in a few years, morph into what we now call film noir. So that's what I'm presenting this evening. When I come up to Seattle, one of the great treats of doing this is that SIF has a really good community outreach in the local schools. And I go to the high schools and colleges and talk to various classes about the history of film and film noir in general and what led to its being. And one of the things I always talk about is the development of what was known as the Hollywood Production Code, because that code has a lot of bearing on what would become film noir. So when people refer to pre-code films, which is what you're going to see this evening, they are specifically referring to movies made in Hollywood prior to 1934. Because in 1934, Hollywood decided to self-police the business for various reasons. The Catholic Legion of Decency, which strong-armed the Production Code Office, really felt that America's moral fiber was deteriorating due to the things that Hollywood was putting out on American movie screens. So they created a code that had a list of do's and don'ts for what was allowable in human behavior on movie screens. And you are seeing tonight two movies made before the enactment of that code. It's interesting to note, I mean, obviously a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about, and it led to a lot of silly stuff like, you know, men and women, even if they were married, could not sleep in the same bed. They had to have two single beds in the bedroom because, God forbid, America's moral fiber would, you know, crash down if we ever thought that men and women actually slept together, even though that is how we propagate the race and all that, but that's okay. So, sorry, very sorry about that. However, you know, pre-code movies are never mentioned anymore without the word racy being used in front of the term pre-code. And all of that is, you know, very subjective. What you might consider to be racy. I prefer to use the term mature because they dealt with subject matter that was much more mature prior to 1934, as you are about to see in the next film. Everything kind of got put on hold from 34 to 44, and then in 1944, particularly with the release of Double Indemnity, things got a little more mature again. Of course, living through the Depression and World War II might have something to do with America's increased maturity. It's possible that we were then ready to actually see more adult subjects on the movie screen. But it's just fascinating. There's that really strange 10 years from 34 to 44 where America kind of had its innocence reinforced upon itself, and then film noir had a lot to do with our loss of innocence, if you will, after that. So the films we're going to show tonight, I don't think of as particularly noir, although I like to imagine what they would be like if they were made 12 or 15 years later than they were, and with the influence of many of the European filmmakers who came to Hollywood during this period. The things that really impacted noir, the writing style, the American vernacular writing style that we now call hard-boiled, was just developing at the time these movies were made, and a lot of the filmmakers, especially the Europeans like Billy Wilder and Otto Preminger and Robert Siodmak, hadn't yet come to the United States and made their mark in Hollywood, and a lot of their ideas and their stylistics would be incorporated into what we now call film noir. The picture you're about to see was made at Universal Studios, and I want to talk about, just for a second, about a guy named Carl Laemmle Jr., who was the head of production at Universal from 1928 to 1936. He was the son of Carl Laemmle Sr., obviously, the man who created Universal Pictures. And movie history has not been particularly kind to Carl Laemmle Jr. because he was run out of the studio because they had lost so much money bankrolling projects that he thought were good ideas to turn into movies. But in point of fact, when you look at his filmography and the movies that he chose to make at the studio, from that time, 28 when he started, till 36 when he left, that's probably the best group of movies that were made in Hollywood at that time. Everybody knows about his fantastic horror films, Frankenstein and Dracula, The Mummy, The Invisible Man. All those pictures were Carl Laemmle productions. But lesser known are a lot of the very adult dramas that he created, a lot of which feel like proto-noir type films. Last year we showed two of those here, OK America and Afraid to Talk, and both of the films that you're going to see tonight were produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., and I think he really deserves to be reappraised for his contribution to Hollywood. This is an early film directed by William Wyler. It is very fitting that we're showing this picture on the night of the Academy Awards because he is, in the history of Hollywood, the director most nominated for Best Director over the course of his career. He had tremendous luck with actors. 36 actors and actresses who appeared in his films were nominated for either Best Actor or Best Actress, and 14 of them actually won the Oscar in films that he directed. He was a distant relative of the Laemmle family, so when he came to Hollywood, he was a bit of a ne'er-do-well, and a lot of people in Hollywood looked down upon him because they thought he was really only getting work because he knew the Laemmle family. In fact, Irving Thalberg, who was one of the titans of early Hollywood, had described him very sarcastically as worthless Willie. And in 1965, William Wyler would win the Irving Thalberg Award bestowed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for the depth and breadth of his fabulous cinematic career. He really is one of the giant directors in the history of Hollywood, and you are going to see in this film one of his earliest grapplings with this young language of cinema. And in 1931, he was so far ahead of a lot of other filmmakers at that time, it really is kind of marvelous to see. And it is a bit clunky in spots, but you will see the birth of the cinematic language in many ways in this film, and the way they actually deal with sound. This is a very early, sound had only been around for a couple of years at this point, and he's really trying to assemble this all into a coherent whole. And it's quite a dramatic film. The audience for the earlier show today was quite taken with this. It stars Walter Huston. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Walter Huston. He is, of course, the father of the legendary John Huston. And at the time they made this picture, Walter Huston was probably the greatest actor in America. And John Huston, his son, one of his first jobs in Hollywood was writing the dialogue for this picture. So you will see there's a credit for the son as well. And given that this is a movie about an intense competition between father and son, that would actually exist between those two men in a very positive way. And of course the son would eventually win the father. Walter Huston won Best Actor, Oscar, for Dodsworth in 36, and Best Supporting Actor for Treasure of the Sierra Madre that his son wrote and directed 10 years after that. So it's really a super film. If you're a Dracula fan, you know Helen Chandler, who appears in this movie because her only other claim to fame is being menaced by Bela Lugosi in Dracula. And Kent Douglas, whose real name is Douglas Montgomery, appears in this film and makes quite an impression, I think. And his career was derailed because the studio kept changing his name. So he's Kent Douglas in this movie, but he's really Douglas Montgomery, and I think he actually acted under 2 other names as well. You might, if you're a fan of old films, you're going to feel, wasn't this movie supposed to star Lon Chaney? You will feel that at some point, I guarantee it. And in fact, Conga was a picture that Walter Huston made that inspired a picture called West of Zanzibar that Lon Chaney made, and then this was made so that Walter Huston could then play the same kind of part again that Lon Chaney played in West of Zanzibar. You got that? Okay, there will be a quiz afterwards. Okay, no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, pre-code, 1931, William Wyler's A House Divided. Thank you.